Hi, you're watching a very special edition of Agenda AWANI right here in Hanoi, Vietnam, because this is the 27th WEF or WEF, World Economic Forum ASEAN, and this time it's Vietnam's turn. And the theme, the big theme for this year's meet is about ASEAN and the fourth industrial revolution and entrepreneurship. I'm very proud this time because this year's co-chair is somebody that we've always been discussing things with for WEF. Datuk Sri Nazir, thank you so much for making time to be with me. You're one of the 6 co-chairs, and they're all powerful people, but you're more powerful than the rest for my discussion because I'm going to ask you to encapsulate everything that has been discussed since the open forum the first day until today, very packed second day, and what's relevant for Malaysia. Let's start with the big theme, which is ASEAN and the fourth industrial revolution. Fourth industrial revolution, from my humble point of view, going on ground, not many people really understand it as it is discussed at the World Economic Forum. People from all walks of life know about it, but if you go to certain pockets of or segments of society, the taxi drivers will see it as an evil disruptor that put them out of their jobs. The workers worry if they lower down the production supply chain, they think that automation will kill their careers and jobs too. But there are hope. Our universities, intellect, leaders, businessmen, they see it as our way to jump or leapfrog ahead and catch up with the rest and the best of the world. So as co-chair this year, I would give you the right to tell the Malaysian public where do we stand vis-a-vis that and ASEAN.
Well, thank you, Cam, and thank you for catching up again. I think first and foremost, to take the parlance from Game of Thrones.
Okay.
Winter is coming.
Yep.
Fourth industrial revolution is coming, is perhaps here already. And it's a set of technologies that are changing the way of life in everything that we do, right? And it's pretty complete. It is going to change the way we work, the way we live at home, the way we seek medication, etc., etc. And there's going to be a lot of good things about it. We are all going to live longer. I think, diseases will be much less painful.
Okay.
We're going to be able to get to places faster. Many things will be cheaper, etc., etc. So I think one has to look at the fourth industrial revolution very positively, right? Nevertheless, it is going to come and have disrupt many things, and it will have some negative side effects. So the main argument of this year's World Economic Forum for ASEAN is that we need to face up to this reality. We need to make sure that we prepare ourselves, our population, for this new reality so that we can make the best of it, take all the good things,
okay,
and minimize all the bad things. Bad things will include loss of jobs, potentially, at least loss of existing jobs. It could include increasing inequality because to some extent, in some elements of business, it's a sort of winner-take-all situation, etc., etc. So plus and minus, more pluses, definitely, but those minuses will impact different segments in different ways, and one needs to mitigate it.
Okay. Datuk Sri, I must confess, I stole a glance at your assistance packed schedule of yours for WEF, and I think the leader of Vietnam had an easier time. But I would like to tap into the very busy schedule that you have here, both as co-chair and you always meet your stakeholders here. When you say we must prepare, and people say that in many panels discussions here, in the World Economic Forum, they like to check out the government side, and then there's business corporate, and then there's the social civil society side. But there are also many other stakeholders in between. But just those 3 key aspects, if we benchmark that against the background of Malaysia, I mean, government driving innovation and government driving changes. But at the same time, if the theme for this year's ASEAN's meet is entrepreneurship, haven't we heard that before, that we want now the private sector to lead, including new entrepreneurs, for example? So how do we contextualize that for our country and for the region?
No, I think in the focus here is, of course, ASEAN. And if you look at ASEAN over the course of economic integration, what has been successful? If you look at trade, success has been mixed. I think intra-ASEAN trade over the past 15 years may have gone up from about 18 to 22%. If you look at intra-ASEAN travel, it's probably gone up from about 42 to 44%. But intra-ASEAN investments, intra-ASEAN FDI has gone from 4% to 19.4%. So this business has taken advantage of ASEAN. There has been a proliferation of ASEAN multinationals, proliferation of investments between countries in ASEAN. So that's been a huge success.
Okay.
So much so that it's almost like tail wagging the dog. I remember when I first started, it was governments trying to encourage ASEAN companies to go across borders.
Yes.
Today, business is frustrated that the government is not moving fast enough.
Okay.
So business is definitely pushing ahead, and actually we are asking for a bigger role in ASEAN economic integration. One of our proposals is to transform the ASEAN Secretariat into a platform organization, where they provide the oversight, but the origination of ideas and solutions for economic integration is done by businesses and other stakeholders. Now, insofar as the entrepreneurs are concerned, this year we're excited because we have 80 young entrepreneurs here at WAF for the first time. We've selected the best of ASEAN, new companies, bright young things. And I met a selection of them, and it was exciting. And I really felt better about the prospects of the region because we have the dynamic young people. The issue is whether we can make the best of them, whether we can make ASEAN work for them. I don't want these young people to look at a potential market of 28 million people if they're Malaysian. I want them to be thinking about 650 million people today and much, much more in the future. So I want them to think of accessing the entire ASEAN market. So our job, government's job, the job of our generation is to make this happen for them, make this a reality, that they can actually penetrate ASEAN. I was talking to Vivi of Fashion Valley, and she was telling me even today, it is more convenient for her to export to the UK than to Jakarta. Yeah, it's quicker. And isn't that ridiculous? Right? And we talk about ASEAN. So there's a lot of these logistical issues, payment issues, and so on that ASEAN can address and make it easier for our young entrepreneurs. And related to that, one of my big pushes in this forum is trying to tell the governments that today we have the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint 2025, which is essentially to meet the ASEAN Economic Community targets that were not met in 2015. But guess what? These were targets that were set in 2007. We set those aspirations in a very different time, during the third industrial revolution. We need to review those and set new priorities because the fourth industrial revolution is here. And what does that mean? That means we need to prioritize things like movement of talent, movement of data, and also movement of entrepreneurial capital across the region.
Wow, a lot to digest. Let's go for a first break. I give you a chance to do that once we are back. The B40 and the M40. I think when we talk about ASEAN, this is the majority group that we really need to look at, whether it's for business or anything else. So I would like to tap into your wisdom after this. saya jual soalan dulu. Too many times the B40 is being discussed either as should be receiving handouts or not receiving handouts, or how to empower them. But I heard this morning the founder of Gojek, he said, don't think that the poor people don't have money to spend. It's just that they spend everything on the necessities. And the next Android phone, he said, is going to be reduced soon to maybe 10 to 30 US dollars. So that's going to be a game changer. So it's very refreshing to hear entrepreneurs talk about groups like B40 or M40 because they see it in the dynamic that they're trying to achieve. So that's what I'm going to put to you. You understand the limitation of government, of civil service, of businesses, but water will flow where water wants to flow, and if we do not allow it to flow, it will be flooding or tsunami. So how do we, whatever the problems are, move things along and let the businesses and the new tech businesses to flow, we'll get the best of views after this from the Malaysian co-chair at the 27th WEF ASEAN. You know, I've traveled far and wide. I've gone to Davos, but it always enlightens me more when I see a Malaysian voice and thought leader with the best of the rest of the region and the world. And Datuk Sri Nazir Razak is the Malaysian co-chair, one out of the 6 for this time, WEF ASEAN. So I'm just going to continue with the question I saw earlier, which is the B40 and the M40, I think, give ASEAN a bit of different distinctions compared to Europe or other places. And when we discuss this group, too much or too many times from a policy perspective, we put them in the box and we say, should we give them subsidy or direct handouts or whatever it is. But I heard the Gojek founder in this morning session went straight to the point and said, don't think that they do not have money. They just have money, but it's just enough to buy necessities. The next smartphone of Android will be cheaper and that will change the game. Is this the kind of thinking? Because one of the main pillars of the team at Hanoi is about new leadership to empower all this. What's your views on that?
I mean, I think certainly the fourth industrial revolution brings a huge opportunity for us to be more inclusive. If you look today at what I think should be our priorities is the infrastructure for everyone to be connected to the internet, right? Once you're connected to the internet with 5G or whatever, actually you can be a businessman at home, right? Or a businesswoman at home. And this goes back to the fish and fishing rod argument, right? Then there's also the new attitude of some of the entrepreneurs that I see. They think of making a difference first, making money second. And I see some of these young people actually thinking of solving problems like driving down the cost of handphones, driving down the cost of transport, right, first, and then making money second. And I think that's heartwarming, and I think that gives me cause for even more optimism that actually with the fourth industrial revolution, we could potentially reduce inequality, improve opportunity, right? I think it's always better to give the fishing rod than the fish, obviously, but there will be people who still are marginalized, and there will still be a need for some redistributive policies. And another element to bring into the equation is, of course, education. With the power of the fourth industrial revolution, you can educate people so much more cheaply. And therefore, again, going back to policies for this new industrial revolution, we really need to relook at all our policy documents domestically and regionally so that we leverage to the full
you've always been vocal on this show about talent. And it's pretty obvious at the discussions here when we talk about entrepreneurship, the 4IR and ASEAN, that there was even at the co-chair press conference call by the acting minister from Myanmar to have an ASEAN university for the fourth industrial revolution. I mean, I didn't think of that, but what do you think of? I think it signifies the wanting to reach out and create that platform of ASEAN that you say, and people just want new things and just do it, kind of thing.
No, I think a big part of any 4.0 plan is education, right? Is how do we train the workforce of the future? How do we train the entrepreneurs of the future? And to the extent that Vietnam wants to offer setting up a 4.0 university here, by all means, it can be set up in many countries.
Yeah. Okay, let's go for the last break, but once we are back, I want to delve a bit more into inclusivity, especially also for our country, because it's easier to look at inclusiveness in conflict areas like Myanmar and Rohingyas. But even in Malaysia, the age-old debate about the peninsula and the Borneo side of Malaysia, these are existing divides that technology can be a catalyst for problem solving, or it can widen the gap. So I want to look at inclusivity ingrained into entrepreneurship. Like you said, there are young people who want to drive down prices and then make money second. How do we get that not as an alternative, but as a mainstream movement, a new movement in Malaysia, in ASEAN? Do we change our schooling system and ingrain that from day one? Or what do we do? That's what I want to discuss with Datuk Sri Nazir Razak, one of the 6 co-chairs of the 27th WEF ASEAN, right after this short break. You know, Malaysia was really well represented. Tun Mahathir didn't get to come to Hanoi in Vietnam, but all the rest. And one of the biggest voice of Malaysia is Datuk Sri Nazir Razak. He's one of the 6 co-chair for this year's meet. So I'm going to go straight to the point I was making before. You know, we talk about education and talent and, you know, mobility of economic capital for entrepreneurs and stuff like that. But how do we ensure that we do not repeat the mistakes, especially, I don't like calling them the West, but the first, the second, and the third industrial revolution actually don't really look at things like social justice and all this stuff. But this matters to people in our society. That's why I have been discussing social enterprise. I didn't know the term social enterprise just a few years ago, and World Economic Forum, you know, put it on a pedestal. They have year-long events on that. But for our country and for our region, how do we ingrain that into the top leadership first and then make that a practical action on ground?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very Malaysian to think about the community.
Okay.
It's a very natural instinct. You know, we have our wider family network, and it's instinctive for us to try and look after them. We have our tribes, and we think of looking after them. So it's quite natural, I think, and sometimes what you need to think about is when we then put them into our schools, right, we maintain that attachment to those natural instincts.
Okay.
And I look at somehow with the development of the internet, the spread of knowledge, and the perception about what has gone wrong with the sort of US Western capitalist system, I look at the young generation today, and you're seeing that already. Mm-hmm. You look at even my kids, you know, they're not thinking yet of becoming bankers or whatever. They're actually sort of asking me, hey, why don't I go into sustainability? You know, how do I make a difference in the world? They're not, in my time, everybody wanted to be an investment banker or an accountant. Yeah, and I think it also, I guess, reflects a generational change in Malaysia totally. But I'm quite optimistic.
Okay. Another thing that was already there even before the fourth industrial revolution was this divide in business from the SMEs to the big corporations. And you've spoken with me on this before, but I just want to add on because this morning I interviewed a fintech. They're from Europe, two of them. Then they partnered a Filipino, relocated to Manila, and now they're trying to make invoices or any document for the SME digital, and they can bring it to them, and they use AI analytics, all that, and decide whether they can get financing. I mean, these are the things that are happening because of the 4IR. So in that sense, we have always been talking about our SMEs in Malaysia need to be better, need to move up the scale. Do you see that happening now with all this that being discussed?
And I do. And it's exciting simply because, ASEAN today, 50% of GDP is already SMEs, 80% of employment is already is SMEs. So the rise of SME, right, will be good for ASEAN, good for ASEAN's population. And fourth industrial revolution is empowering SMEs. Yeah, it's enabling existing SMEs, making them more productive, etc. It's also creating opportunities for new SMEs, somewhat at the expense of the big companies.
Okay.
And this is where, again, regulators or government have to step in to make sure that the big companies do not protect themselves unfairly against the onslaught of the small companies. And secondly, I think there's a role by government to encourage big companies to work with SMEs and creative tech companies to pull together domain knowledge, customer base of big companies with the technological capabilities and entrepreneurism of the small companies to create a winning solution.
You're very confident that Malaysia and the rest of the ASEAN countries can really not only survive the tsunami of the fourth industrial revolution but also champion it?
Well, I think that the important thing is it starts with understanding the challenge and facing up to it. And from what I've seen from the leaders' speeches today and the work that Secretariat has done in terms of, they've done a survey of readiness of ASEAN countries with the fourth industrial revolution. So I think we have a good starting point now. So I'd like to see us really put 4.0 front and center of ASEAN and also of the national agendas across the region.
And WEF is so diverse that there's a discussion on do not allow the technology to control us. We control the technology. So just a light question, the human side. I know it's very tough on the schedule to be a co-chair. How has it been for you the first and second day? The human side, just the human side.
No, it's been okay. I think, I try and attend as much as I can because I've got the graveyard shift, which is the last panel tomorrow to kind of sum up what transpired over 2 days. So you've got to, keep your ear to the ground so that we can talk about what happened. But I'm actually feeling good about WF 2018. I think whereas I had some hesitation about whether this 4.0 is fully understood, the threat is fully understood and appreciated. I heard the speeches of all the leaders, and it is. So now it's about action.
Thank you so much. I'm going to break protocol. I want to high five because I've never high fived a co-chair before. Thank you so much. That was Datuk Sri Nazir Razak, the Malaysian co-chair of the WEF in Hanoi, Vietnam for 2018. And this is the first WEF in the era of Malaysia Baru. You've heard one of the co-chairs says that he has hope for us to excel even better with the hopes of Malaysia Baru. So that's all from me. Thanks to you for watching. And this has been a very specially recorded episode of Agenda AWANI from WEF in Hanoi, Vietnam. See you again soon. Bye. Thank you so much. Thank you.